So hi, this little presentation is going to be on what I believe is the safest position for your child in the vehicle, so you can make a bit more of an educated or an evidence-based decision on where you want to place your children in the vehicle. Now this information and advice is based on a perfect fit for the child restraint, so we're not talking about any issues with centre seats working or not. I'm basically just talking about the positions in the vehicle and how you'll place your children, and more for me is age specific, how you place the children in the vehicle. So for me, this middle position here is our safest position. This is safest for a number of reasons. The main reason is it's furthest away from the edges of the vehicle. So in essence, it is further away from the crash impact and the direct forces that are involved. Those forces are still going to be felt through the vehicle, but the child or even an adult in this position is actually in the safest position for the vehicle because they're furthest away from one of the edges and it's going to have less crumple zone. Your next safest position is here. Now this one's a little bit controversial, and from obviously a couple of the posts, there's a little bit of confusion between this on the left hand side and number 3 on the right hand side behind the driver. So this advice is based on a New Zealand road or on a road where you drive on the left hand side of the road being the safest one. Now the two rear seats, we'll discuss a bit longer. The two rear seats, look, in my diagram I have 4 and 5. It doesn't really matter which way up for me in these back two seat positions that the children can be. And I'll discuss a little bit about the back seat there at the end as well, because some of my opinions are probably a little bit different from others on having children in the rear of certain people movers that are smaller. And then the last position here in the front, number 6, is the front passenger seat. So for me, this is an absolute last resort for having a child, and I personally don't think anyone over the age of 10 should be in the front seat of the vehicle. That's regardless of whether there's an airbag or not. Obviously, if it's a van or a convertible, then those things change a little bit. But for me, if you've got the choice here, and that's what this is about, it's the choice, and it's having some advice coming from a bit of a physics and a bit of a crash background to make the correct decision. So let's talk about, while the middle's the safest, the passenger's the second safest, behind the driver's number 3, 4 and 5 up the back, and they're fairly interchangeable, to be honest, in my opinion. But this way here is probably, if you're going to keep on some of the other opinions, and that's the safest, and then number 6 in the front. So let's have a look why I make those decisions, because just because I say that it's the safest, let's have a little bit of proof. So say we've got our little blue car here at the intersection, and we have a couple of vehicles driving along. So we have one vehicle driving along this way, and we have another vehicle driving along in the other direction. So as far as we're concerned, this is probably the busiest time you're going to have on the road. So our driver in our blue car here has a couple of threats or risks to them in the vehicle. And the highest risk is actually here. So this one here is the biggest risk they have, because they have to cross that lane first. So if they're going to be making a turn though, they're going to be making a turn on an angle and then into this lane here. So a driver is going to be more concerned with the vehicle in that lane, but also checking for the vehicle on the left-hand side as well. So whilst a crash could occur between the blue and the red vehicle, it's more likely that they're going to be paying more attention on the right here, and I've seen this happen on a number of times in a number of crash investigations I've dealt with, but they're more likely to not see the vehicle on the left-hand side. If that does occur though, if we take our blue car here and say that it's moved out now, and it's actually coming through here, it's now going to be on an angle. So if a collision does occur between the grey car and the blue car, it's going to be an offset angle or an offset impact. So you're going to have less crash forces exerted on the left-hand side of the vehicle. So the left-hand position, or the position I call number 2, is going to be the safest in the fact that if there is an impact on the left-hand side, it's not going to be a direct impact. It's not going to be at a 90 degree, which is the worst for the forces, and it's going to be on an angle. So that's one reason why I place number 2, or the left rear passenger position, much safer. The second one we've got is when we have what's commonly happens in New Zealand is we have high-speed open roads with the only safety feature really being a white painted line in the middle. If you have your child on the right-hand side of the vehicle and either your vehicle or the other vehicle crosses over, you're more likely to have a collision on the driver's side of the vehicle. And just the same as if you have a 90 degree impact on this side, if you have an impact between two vehicles, and we talk about this being a principal direction of force in crash or in physics, you're going to have a collision here. Say we have our red car crosses the centre line and has a collision with our blue car. When that collision occurs, the principal direction of force, or the amount of energy, or how the energy, to describe how it goes to the vehicle, is going to come through this side of the vehicle. So more of the force and more of the energy is going to be felt by the driver, the passenger on that side, and in the third row, the passenger on that side as well. And there's going to be less forces on the left-hand side of the vehicle. So these occupants on this side here are going to feel less of the impact than the other side. And a head-on collision is the worst possible collision that a person can face. And that was described in the other video I've talked about as well. So there's two reasons why you want to have the youngest child, if you have a choice, on the left-hand side of the vehicle. Because for a lot of vehicles, we can't fit it in the middle seat. So that's why the left-hand one's safer. The other reason why I place the left-hand side as the safer vehicle is simply to do with getting the child in and out of the vehicle. Now, when we're getting children in and out of the vehicle, I have two monsters of my own, and it's not, sometimes, especially when they get to about that age, 18 months, they start planking and don't want to get in the seat at all, and they turn into a rock solid, and they start getting annoying. And when we're dealing with young children, we want to make sure that we're actually getting them in the vehicle and we're correctly adjusting the harness. So if you've got your vehicle parked on the left-hand side here, we'll have Mr. Blue vehicle, and we will place them, say they're parked on the side of the road and they've been getting their children in and out. If you're on the right-hand side of the vehicle here, and you're trying to get a child in and out, you're now standing in the live lane of traffic. So if our red car here does a 360, and starts coming down the road, they're now going to have to observe your vehicle on the side of the road, and you're now sitting in the line of travel for them as they're coming down the road. And that's putting you at risk. And it does happen in New Zealand that people get hit, especially with the fact that the red car is actually responsible for staying on their side of the road. So if they've got a vehicle coming the other way, the red car is going to have to slow down. So if you're on that side of the vehicle, you're generally going to have your back to the red vehicle, so you're going to be less observant or less situationally aware. And you're probably going to rush a little bit more to get your child in and out of the vehicle and not spend time to make sure the capsule's locked in or make sure their harness is correctly adjusted. So for me, again, having the child on the left-hand side of the vehicle or anyone in and out on the left-hand side of the vehicle is crucial. Now, I've always had people movers and it's a bit easier to get in and out, but my boys never get out on the roadside. And same as when I'm instructing police officers as well. When we get out, that's a lot of the time where we have a risk, is when we're getting out of that driver's side into the flow of traffic. And we can't be assured that the driver of the red car here isn't distracted by a cell phone or having a coffee or whatever else it happens to be. And we're going to be in danger. So there's the third reason why you want to have them on the left-hand side of the vehicle. One, when you're turning, the impact's going to be less. Two, if you do have, or a vehicle crosses the centre line, the forces are all going to go down the driver's side of the vehicle. Not very good for you as the driver, but your youngest child is going to be on the left-hand side. And here, when we're getting them in and out of the vehicle, it's safer for you to be spending more time on the footpath side than standing on the roadside. And that includes a toddler trying to get them in a harness or in a seatbelt booster. You're going to be rushing, and you're going to be more likely to make a mistake because you don't want to get your butt taken out by the passing vehicle. So if we go back to our original diagram, we're going to start having a look here again. So position number one, look, if we can get an install of our child restraint in there, and that's whether there's a lap belt or not. So your US and your Australian standard seats can be fitted with a lap belt, and in some respects it's actually a little bit easier because you don't need a locking clip, generally. Some of the people movers from Japan you do, and that causes issues. But if you can have the install in the middle there, you've got a tether, then that is the safest place in the vehicle because you're furthest away from the edges of the vehicle. And in a side impact, so in New Zealand, a nose to tails are the most common collision. Then it's a side impact, and then it's a head-on. And the head-on and the side impacts are where we experience the most crash forces and have the most injuries. So one of the comments there was that number 3 here is the safer side of the vehicle. And this was a myth that sort of came around in the 70s and 80s, that a driver unconsciously will look after themselves. So they'll swerve to avoid an impact, or swerve to avoid a collision to look after themselves, and they may not look after passengers on the left-hand side. Well, in New Zealand, statistically, the left-hand side of the vehicle is safer. And what actually happens in a collision is there couldn't be anything further from the truth. You actually will get tunnel vision, and a lot of people, especially motorcyclists, but it happens with cars as well, you end up concentrating on your threat, so whether it be a power pole or another vehicle, and you unintentionally actually end up steering into collisions. And this is a very common occurrence that happens, and you may have seen on the road. You'll be a straight piece of road and wonder why the car's hit the only power pole or the only tree. And that's what happens. You have target fixation and you end up steering into or turning into it. One of the other comments was to do with a booster in the middle. So for me, this list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6 is based on the youngest child should be in the smallest number. And that's whether they're rear facing or not. So they're in the safest positions. If you've got a booster in the vehicle, and I'm talking about a full-back booster with a seatbelt, then if that's correctly installed, then that's a good, safe seat, obviously as long as your child behaves in the seat. So there's no difference. But the younger the child is, the further away they've got to be. And that's got to do with their development again, the bone structure, the muscles, all those ones, and being able to absorb an impact. And it's a sad fact, but a child under 10 years old and an adult over 70-year-old is a lot higher at risk of the injuries actually causing a fatality on the road. And hence why a serious crash unit will get called out to a crash involving young children or adults or elderly people over if they were just an adult, say of my age of 41 years old. So the last one I thought I'd cover off is the old Honda Edix. Now, this vehicle and the Ford Multipla actually have a middle seat. So they have a front seat sitting in the middle of the vehicle that can actually move backwards and forwards, and that sits in here in between the two front. So for me, that's still a safe position because the vehicle's been designed for that purpose. They're actually quite clever seats with the mountings and the tethers and things on them. So that position there, you're still looking at the centre of the vehicle, so you're furthest away from a side impact. So that's important because side impacts, there's less crumple zone on the side of your vehicle, aren't there? You're looking at some thin metal and a bit of steel, whereas the front and rear of the vehicles have some crumple zones. So I still think they're a safe position in the vehicle. Yes, they're in the front of the vehicle, but again, this is coming down to a practical choice where you have to start looking at it. If you have multiple children with seats, you've got to start making the decision of where you want to have the child. And for me, you would try and have the oldest child in that centre seat out of all the children you have, and you'd still have your youngest children in one of the seats back here or here in the Honda. So there was one other comment about fuel tanks. So fuel tanks in vehicles are actually part of the design rules. They're actually made to sit in most vehicles. And if this was a people mover, the fuel tank would be about here. So it's actually made to be in front of the rear wheels, because what happened in America is they had a spate of nose-to-tail crashes at high speed, and the fuel tank would rupture and they'd catch on fire. So, look, fires and crashes are very uncommon. They're not a common thing that occurs. In my entire time in crash, I only went to one vehicle that had actually caught on fire after a crash. So fuel tanks are very strong. They're actually, a lot of them are made out of plastic, but they're actually stronger than a steel tank. And it's very unlikely you're going to have something like a fire and a collision, unless we're talking about a major collision. And then we're actually, a lot of bets are off whether you've got a 5-star rated vehicle or not. So, look, it's a concern and it's good to think about, but really it's one of those ones to not worry about. The vehicle's fuel tanks have been designed, they have shut-off valves, and they also have a valve to stop an explosion occurring as well in most of the tanks. So the last one I just thought I'd talk about, not make this video too long, is these seating positions here in the back. So on the little diagram, I've got 4 up here and 5. Look, as I said, they're fairly interchangeable, and I'll probably change my little diagram to switch them around again. My concern with the rear of a lot of the people mover vehicles is this rear row here is very close to the rear of the vehicle. So this is a Nissan. I'm not too sure what model Nissan it is, but this rear part of the vehicle is very close. So the seats are basically on the rear window. So if you have a larger people mover, an MPV, an Odyssey, Mitsubishi Grandis, Mitsubishi Outlanders, they have a lot more crumple zone in the back. So when a vehicle engineer is looking at crashes, all the crash standards, and this is where we come back to passing a standard, are all to do with head-on crashes and side impacts. They don't actually crash test the rear of the vehicle or nose-to-tail collisions. So there's a lot of crumple zone there that's quite weak. And my concern with having children in the back is I've seen even large vehicles like Ford Territories and things like that actually crumple and the floor collapse with a nose-to-tail collision. And they are more common. That's not to say you can't put the children in there again, but again, for me, the older children are in that rear row and they're forward-facing. I'm not super keen on rear-facing children in the back. Look, if you have to do it, then you do. But if you've got the choice of moving the children around in the vehicle, then I would much rather have someone in a proper full booster in the back, because a lot of those seats, again, are a lot weaker and smaller, and we're talking about the vehicle seats, on those rear rows, because they have to fold up and down. I have a 2017 Mitsubishi Outlander, and the back two seats are all but pointless. And you'll say, well, the engineer, why build the seat? Well, look, for a lot of engineers, they're trying to fit in as many seats as they can so they can sell a product. And that's where we have concerns. And that's where you'll find a lot of the rear seats in the third row don't have tethers and that on them. And a lot of the manufacturers, like Mitsubishi with the Outlander, a couple of the years don't allow them. And then just the recent model of mine has actually allowed the seat in the back. And a Toyota Highlander is another one. So I'll leave the video there. I hope that's been informative, and I'll probably look at doing some other training videos like this and allow you guys to actually ask me questions so I can answer, that burning topic or that subject that you might want to have. Cool. Thank you.